From the C Squared Studios in Temecula, California, welcome to WedCast, part of the C Squared Radio Network. And now, here is your host, Mike Carroll.
Welcome to WedCast, part of the C Squared Radio Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Mike Carroll. WedCast is all about weddings. If you're planning a wedding in the wedding biz or you just love weddings, then this is a show for you. I'll share some stories and give some tips that I've gathered from my 20-plus years in the wedding business, as well as interview wedding industry experts. It will be fun and informative. So, once again, here I am sitting in front of a live microphone, wondering where to begin. And to just kind of put the time into context, we are recording this in May 2020, and currently the wedding industry is on pause because of the coronavirus global pandemic. Large gatherings have been postponed. Large gatherings, and this includes weddings, they've been postponed. Some have been canceled, but they're not taking place. And that's when it hit me. You know, couples are still planning their weddings. We're still getting inquiries for, latter part of 2020 and early part of 2020 or 2021. And so couples are out there planning, and that's when it kind of hit on me. That's the best place to start. I remember when I got married back in 2007, and I had been in the business for about 7 years now, and my wife was a designer with Ethan Allen, so she had the design style covered, but I made the decision to hire a planner. And a lot of people told me, why are you hiring a planner? You know, you can do this, I can do this, and I had the timeline covered. I knew exactly the order of events that I wanted and how I kind of wanted the wedding to unfold. So we really just needed someone to kind of make sure that the day of that got executed, but then also to make sure in the months leading up to the wedding that we were on top of things, that vendors were getting paid, that RSVPs were getting turned in, and so on and so forth. And so that's why I decided to carve out a portion of the wedding budget for a planner. And you know, one of the distinction that there are is between a planner and a coordinator, and you know, I'll go over that with Michelle when we get to the interview portion. But we needed a coordinator, and you know, the coordinator that we hired her name is Kimmy. She's also a planner, but we wanted the coordination services. That's what we needed. And you know, and fast forward to the day of the wedding, I get a call from my father-in-law that, you know, there's a hiccup, and I call it a hiccup because in the grand scheme of things, that's really all it was. But my response was, well, why are you calling me? This is why I've got Kimmy, and call her. And he did, and she handled it. And, you know, everything else that came up, she kind of made sure the day was running smoothly. And I'm very cautious to use the word smooth as opposed to perfect, because with my own couples, I try to manage expectations. If a bride comes in and says, I want a perfect wedding, yeah, perfect wedding doesn't necessarily exist. The best that you can hope for is that it's perfect to you. And what that means is that you hire pros who can smooth over the rough spots and make it seem like everything happens in such a fashion. I was a guest at a wedding once where the DJ, I presume he started to play the wrong song, but quickly, without anyone else noticing, he mixed in the right song. And I talked to the bride afterwards, and she was like, no, that never happened. So the DJ, if it ever comes up, I apologize for throwing you under the bus. But that's what we're there for. We're there for to make sure that the rough spots get smoothed over and that everything seems perfect. And so enough for me. Let's get to our guest. She has a resume that spans large corporate events for companies like the San Diego Padres and many politicians to weddings of all size. She has built a business that balances design and planning and is widely considered to be one of the top wedding planners in California. And in 2019, California Wedding Day named her the top event designer in San Diego and Temecula. Not only is she a Knot Pro educator, but she is also in the Knot Hall of Fame. Our guest for the show is Michelle Garibay of Michelle Garibay Events. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Mike. How are you?
Oh, I am hanging in there. How about yourself?
I'm doing well. The weather is getting really nice, so that makes me a happy girl.
Yes, it is definitely much nicer out, and so far it's not as hot as it had been, so that's good.
Yeah.
So introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell them who you are and what you do, and about your company.
Sure. I am Michelle Garibay with Michelle Garibay Events. I am the owner, creative director, lead planner. I am a wedding planner based in Temecula, although we do service Palm Springs and plenty of other destinations like Mexico and Hawaii. I've owned my company for 14 years.
You mentioned Hawaii, and that's one of the things that I want to get into with you is destination and the differences between there. But before we get to that, how did you get into the planning business?
Sure. Well, I was in San Diego and got my start pretty much in corporate events and working for the Padres, and I was in government politics for a while. That was kind of my start. And then when my husband, he's retired Navy, but at the time, he was transferred to Hawaii to finish out his career. So we were moved over there by the U.S. Navy. So he finished his career out there, and I said, well, what am I going to do for work over there besides sit on the beach and do nothing? So I made the transition to weddings. That was in 2006, and I never looked back. I realized in the corporate events, yes, I'm highly organized, but I'm also highly creative. So the corporate events, I knew there was something missing kind of in the back of my mind. I just never knew what that was until I made the transition to weddings. I'm like, aha, this is where I'm supposed to be, because not only am I utilizing my organizational skills and logistical skills, but now I get to be creative and celebrate love and create happiness and joy for couples and create all the pretty things. So that was a perfect fit for me. And like I said, once I started the company 2006, I never looked back, and here we are in 2020.
It was the emotion that did it for me. I know a lot of people say that's why they prefer corporates, because of the lack of emotion. But I like the highs are much higher. Now granted, the lows can be much lower, but it's that highs that they get me into it. One of the biggest controversies in the coordination, and even myself, and I've been in the business for about 20 years now, I don't even know. Describe the different ranges of planning, design, event management, and the different things, and where you see that you fit. And I know that your company has different coordinators, for lack of a better term, that fit into different stages. Sure. But where do you fit on terminology and how you describe what it is you do?
Sure. Yes, there are a lot of terms thrown around, and some of them are misnomers. But for me and my company, I am a wedding planner and an event designer. Because again, that goes back to both of my strengths on the planning and logistical side. Wedding planning, checking the boxes, coordinating the vendors, getting the contracts, managing a budget. But also the event design side, the aesthetic, the ambiance that you're creating, designing a space, engaging the five senses. So I do both. So wedding planning, event design, and then wedding management is separate. It is, that is what they used to call a day of coordination, which is a huge misnomer. So us planners in the industry are really trying to get rid of that terminology because it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. It's like, oh, we just need a day of coordinator. Well, we can't just show up on the day of. So that's why wedding management is now what we are trying to call it. And it's a much more accurate way to describe what we do, because it's more robust than just a day of coordination service. So we do offer all of those and everything kind of in between, even partial planning. But the wedding management coordination side isn't planning. It's essentially picking up and tying up the loose ends that the couple plans. So there is a difference in service, and there is a difference in terminology. So if you have hired your planner for planning, she is your planner. He or she is your planner. But if they're hired for management, they're not necessarily your planner, even though they might be professionally a planner. I know this is kind of confusing, but there is a difference in, we need to be specific in our language as we're referring to certain aspects of what we do.
Right. And on my side, there's a very big difference between DJ/MC. I know those terms get used interconnected very much, kind of a lot. Yep. like planner and coordinator, and they yep. are two very different jobs that require two very yep. different skill sets. I know that there are companies that use a MC and then a DJ is separate, and I'm guessing in the planning coordination that area that you have coordinators who are very good at what they do, but maybe they're more of for like a traffic cop, so to speak, just to make sure that everything flows smoothly. And that's not to put down the coordination, because believe me, it's one less thing that I have to worry about, but they are two very, very different. And so you say that they're two very different hats that you can put on interchangeably depending upon what your client is looking for.
Absolutely. And personally, I don't like being called a coordinator. Number one, my experience. I've been doing this for 14 years. I am not a coordinator. I am a planner and an event designer. So I get a little, I'm like, oh, I'm not a coordinator. I'm a professional event planner. And when I think, venue coordinators, and that's much different than what we do, although we need them. So it's kind of, DJ, MC, and what's those differences? So this is not degrading anything that anybody does and what those titles are, but there is a difference. So we just need to make sure that we're using the correct language when we refer to what we are actually doing. Like with you, Mike, I would never call you just a DJ. You are an MC who is also a DJ. So you have both of those roles. So, and this is even part when I'm explaining and helping my clients understand, this is what I make sure that I'm very clear with them on what those differences are. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's something that I know exists, but I've never really looked at it. And even when I use the terms in describing, like I'm working with this coordinator or so on and so forth, it always seems a little, I don't want to use the word demeaning, but I just don't think it gradually encompasses when you're helping the client pick out invitations and even in setting a table space. I mean, I work with some of the best in the business and a lot of your team, and I'll sit there, see them staring at a tablescape and arranging like the silverware and everything so that everything looks perfect. And that's a little bit more than just coordination, in my opinion, at least.
Absolutely. And there's also, to flip that on the other side, there's also, fellow colleagues who don't like to plan or design, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
We all have our comfort zones and our specialties and what we like to serve. Some of our industry friends like doing coordination only, and that's awesome. There's a place for all of us. So
yeah, I worked with a coordinator who she flat out told me that was her. She said, my job is more of like a logistical clipboard kind of person, and she was happy with that, and so that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
You did mention starting off in Hawaii, and so you have experience planning weddings in Hawaii, California, all over California, and even Mexico. What are some of the differences that a destination wedding has that maybe a local wedding wouldn't?
Sure. Destination weddings are exactly how I got my start. Even though I was in Hawaii, I rarely worked with local couples. Not bad, not good. That's just the niche that I fell into. So I worked mostly with US and Canadian clients coming to Hawaii to get married. So 99.9% of what I did was via email and, virtually. So I rarely met my couples in person. And that is very true with destination weddings. If you are in the location that they're getting married in, or even in Temecula and Palm Springs, we still specialize and do a lot more destination weddings. It's very rare that we work with couples who are actually in Temecula or in Palm Springs locally. We're in a destination wedding market, and those are our specialty areas to where that is still the case. So it's the difference between meeting and being with your clients in person more than not. Destination weddings, most of what you do is virtual. So video calls, phone calls, and emails. So building the trust is super important. And you have to learn how to build trust over the phone. And what does that look like? And how do you manage your clients and manage expectations when you're actually not able to be with them in person to kind of see that body language and rapport. So it's another skill set to do destination weddings for sure, because of how much harder you need to work to build the trust with your clients.
What are the differences with regards to license? I know in the United States, licenses are license, or states, if one state recognizes a marriage, all states have to recognize the marriage. But that's not necessarily true with other countries. A couple getting married in Mexico, are there things that they need to take care of to make sure that their marriage is legally recognized in the United States?
Yes, absolutely. The requirement of different countries is super important for Americans going to those countries because that's not really something that they think about. Mexico, for example, requires, and I may not be completely accurate because it's been a while since I've looked at it, but there is a residency requirement. I think they have to be in Mexico at least 7 days, then the marriage license, and so many days after they get their marriage license, they are allowed to get married. Plus, I think they still require a blood test. So once I explain that to my couples, they kind of get a little freaked out. Who is excited about getting poked at the needle in another country? I know I'm not. So most of my couples opt to get married legally in the United States. And then when they go to Mexico, it's what they call a symbolic ceremony, to where it's just going through the motions, but there's no legalities involved.
Interesting. I did not know that that there was that many differences. I did have some friends who were going to get married in Mexico, which was the first time I heard of this, and they said that they were going to have a legal ceremony in the United States, and then like you said, just go down there and go through the motions there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what happens when they choose a symbolic ceremony, because they don't want to go through the legalities of getting married in Mexico. And most couples opt to do that. In my experience, it's very rare that my couples actually get married in Mexico.
So
legally,
assuming they do, and this may be asking a question that you may not know the answer to, but that's fine. Assuming they do want to do the whole legality of it, do they then still have to get legally married in the United States, or will it be recognized?
That is an excellent question that I do not know the answer to, because I've never had to experience that with my couples, but it's one that I should probably find out the answer to.
We'll have to Google that one. And that was just one thing that popped into my mind, is like, well, would it even be recognized? If you went through all of that, having a blood test and everything, would you then still have to come back and file your taxes and have the IRS go, nope, that doesn't count?
My gut would say no, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? To where it'd be illegal in the United States if you get married. I don't know. That's a tough one. But yeah, I'll definitely have to get up to speed on that.
Well, that's where we give the disclaimer that the views presented on Broadcast are those of the guests and the host, and in no way legal representation whatsoever. So I don't want to hear anything about, well, Michelle said we were going to have to. So
yeah.
We're
disclaimer: I am not an attorney or a medical professional or a elected official.
I'll have to put that on the list. I have to get an attorney here so we can get that. That's going to be the real exciting episode right now. We're going to get Braden in and talk about the nuts and bolts of legality of marriage.
Yes, perfect.
What are some of the regional differences that you've seen, specifically Hawaii to California, as far as how a reception is run? What are expectations here in California? We're used to, kind of a ceremony, cocktail, dinner, dancing as kind of an organization, and that's what people expect. I know East Coast, it's very different. What's it like in Hawaii?
There aren't many differences. People are so surprised to learn that 10 p.m. noise ordinance is pretty much anywhere you go in this country, unless you are indoors. Even in Hawaii, 10 p.m. outdoor weddings, you have to move it inside. And they're like, really? Yes. So it does not matter where you are. It's, noise ordinance is noise ordinance. There really aren't that many differences, because again, it's mostly destination couples coming to Hawaii. The ceremony, a pre-ceremony cocktail as everyone's gathering, ceremony, cocktail hour, dinner, and dancing. So there aren't very many differences, unless there's cultural differences. But then again, you're going to find that anywhere, even in the United States.
Right, exactly. Cultural differences happen. You and I talk about money dance a lot, and that's still very much very much a cultural thing that some cultures just expect it, whereas others are like, what's a money dance? I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, I guess, aren't they calling it a honeymoon dance now? So it doesn't sound so crass.
It's been called everything from a honeymoon dance, a money dance, a dollar dance. It's
dollar dance.
Yeah. People when it happens, people know, they either know what it is or they don't.
It's the thing. I just don't do enough of them. Money, dollar dance, whatever. It's still important in certain cultures. So, but yeah, I just don't do many of them anymore.
Well, and this is not about me, but I always like interjecting stories wherever I can. because I just like to talk and tell stories.
Well, this is your podcast.
Well, but the podcast is here to okay, yes, every guest on a podcast is there to make the host look good. That's what it comes down to. But we just don't admit it. We don't admit it. But I did one where the groom was from Argentina. Or well, his family's from Argentina. He and all of his brothers and sisters were born in the U.S. And his brother comes up and goes, "What time are we doing the money dance?" And the bride and groom were very specific, no money dance. I'm like, "Oh, well, they're not doing it." And the brother goes, "Well, they want it. Who wants it? The family. You know, I work for the bride and groom."
Yeah.
5 minutes later, he comes back and he's like, "I asked them, and they want to do a money dance." I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm going to go talk to the bride." I talked to the bride, and the bride's like, "No, you can tell his brother where to shove it in polite terms." And so that did not, but he was insistent on doing a money dance. And so that's the length some will go to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love cultural weddings, especially when there's certain things that aren't the norm with American weddings, because that's such a fun way to incorporate those elements for a surprise. I am working with a groom, and he's Brazilian, and I'm working with the bride to hopefully surprise him and bring in some Brazilian dancers to open up dancing. So I love incorporating those elements to really personalize the wedding for them. It's so much fun.
And that goes along to actually with the next question that I was going to ask. You can especially with photographers, I can tell a picture taken by one photographer versus another, but everything you do has to look different. How do you keep it fresh? Where do you get inspiration from?
Oh, inspiration comes from anywhere but the wedding industry, to be perfectly honest. Fashion, home decor, architecture, art, and just drawing from those elements and, in pop culture, and just taking that coupled with really getting to know the couple as people and who they are in their regular daily lives to kind of give a peek behind the curtain. Designing a wedding isn't just about the pretty stuff. And, I do make it a point to make sure that all of my weddings do not look the same. I don't want to be labeled as, "Oh, that wedding planner did that wedding," and you can tell by looking at that photo. I never want to be pigeonholed like that. So a little secret, a little peek behind the curtain is before I chat with my couples in person, video, or whatever in their initial planning and design consultation, I make them. I ask them politely to send me about 20 to 30 photos, non-wedding related, that speak to who they are as people, what their home looks like, their vacation spots, any pets, family, what is important to them, as people outside of the wedding. Because while the wedding is just one day and it is a very important milestone day, that's not who they are as people and who they are in their regular lives. So it's very important for me to get a peek into what that is and who they are. And then from that is how I design a wedding that is unique to them.
So kind of walk me through and walk my listeners through a typical process with you from you. And we're going to deal with just full planning, because I think that's the one that I think where you get to shine and show off those creative skills that you have. So for full planning from the second they book to the end of the process, what's kind of like a general timeline? What's kind of like your workflow? How do you work? How do you get the ideas? How do you put them together?
Sure. And just to clarify, I only handle full planning and design clients. I do not take wedding management clients anymore. That's just not what I do. Because again, it's not utilizing my skill set to the client's benefit. So I only handle full planning events. Even if they have the venue and then they come to me, but that's still essentially full planning minus the venue. But a typical wedding or typical planning process in broad strokes, once they sign the contract with me and we get the green light to go, it's their initial planning and design consultation. It's at least 90 minutes, either on the phone or in person, if at all possible. I really like to try and get them in person, even if it's a destination wedding. Because that's how we build that initial rapport and trust. And if it's not possible, video call works as well. But again, diving into their preferences, their must-haves, their non-negotiables, their dislikes, what type of music are they looking for? So it's not just about what your colors are and what kind of flowers you want to have on the table, but what does the entire wedding day experience look like and feel like and smell like to you, and how you want your guests to experience it as well. So it's a pretty extensive, in-depth meeting. And then from that information, I also put together a line item budget estimate based on their guest count and coupled with their expectations and their wedding vision. And then from there, it's essentially me pulling and streamlining the vendor selection process. Based on the information that they've given me, I already know which of my professional creative partners, or even if it's outside of my immediate circle, maybe it's someone else that I don't necessarily work with all the time, but based on something that my couple is looking for, I have to pair them together. So I do pull together the team that can best achieve what they're looking for, and matching it with personalities, their style, and the event itself, and coordinating the contract signing and the payment, and facilitating the vendor booking process. And then, of course, handling the RSVPs and our online planning platform that we use with our couples, and the design boards that I put together. Pinterest is great, but it's, to put it in perspective, I have pins on there. God, how long have it? 14 years. I have pins on Pinterest that are almost 14 years old. That is hardly trend forward. So I try to encourage my couples to really stay away from Pinterest when they're trying to plan their wedding. It's great for some things if there's something specific, if they're just looking for some inspiration. But in terms of designing a wedding, I am never going to copy anything on Pinterest. Because again, I'm not going to keep regurgitating things that have been done, 5 years in a row, or even 10 years ago that aren't even, we can do so many cooler things now. So I do design from scratch, and I do put together a 5 to 6, sometimes 8-page PDF of what the ceremony is going to look like, the cocktail hour, the reception, their invitation suite, and signage, and all of those paper products. Tabletop with the tables, the chairs, the linen, charger plates, glassware, flatware, and any other things that they might want to incorporate into the day. So they have a visual roadmap of what their wedding is going to look like. And then, wrapping up all the details of the guests, and then, managing the wedding day. We are essentially the project manager on the wedding day, overseeing setup, directing vendors as needed, and kind of that traffic cop aspect of keeping everybody coordinated and on time, and making sure that we're being proactive in that timeline and not reactive to certain things that might be happening. 99.999% of my weddings start on time. There is no reason for them not to, because most of what we do is in the planning. And then once the execution of that day goes, there's really no reason why things should go wrong. Unless it's some things that are absolutely outside of our control. But I've been doing this long enough to know and confident in saying that, most of my weddings run on time, and there's a reason for that. And just keeping everything on time and keeping the guests entertained and making sure that they're enjoying the experience just as much as the bride and groom are. So yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And of course, we do some fun things for the couples along the way. Our wedding planning fueled tumblers. They get gifts upon signing, and certain fun things along the way too, to kind of make this a fun process for them as well.
That was actually going to be one of the questions. So you're jumping ahead here.
Sorry, I'm mind reading today.
No, that's the fun of this. Is also part of that. Not only do you have to put all this work in, you mentioned design boards and things like that, but I'm also guessing that you have to communicate that to the different creatives as well. You've got to let the florist know this is what they're looking for. You got to let the photographer know this is what they're looking for as well.
Absolutely. It's very important that the entire vendor creative partner team is all on the same page, because we're all connected. It's not just you playing, pushing play. There's certain things that you're involved in too, in the timeline, and making sure the flow of the event and the energy matches everything else we're doing. The floral design is directly tied into the cake design, photo and video working together. So we all have to work together and not just be on our own program. And it's our job as planners to ensure that happens, because again, we are the captain of that ship, and making sure that all of those T's are crossed, I's dotted, and everything goes smoothly, and to where it looks and feels effortless, even though a ton of time and energy and work have been put into making sure it looks that way.
I am you mentioned the DJ's role in the timeline and keeping energy where you need, and that's one of the reasons that as far as the timeline goes, I'm very protective of it. I tell my couples that with the planner is the captain. They've drawn the route, but I believe the DJ is the bus driver. He's the one who knows, okay, we need to speed up or we need to slow down. And obviously I love working with you, Michelle, and I think you know that, but one of the reasons I do is because your timelines kind of reflect that. There's a flow to it, as opposed to just, let's dump everything here so we can get to this sooner. You understand there's an ebb and flow to events that needs to happen.
Absolutely. And it's not just me calling the shots. I very much need the input of you, photo, video, and making sure we're putting the timeline together for the day that makes sense for the success of everyone involved. So it's not just, well, I'm going to do it this way because this is how I do it. No, there's a reason why we need to do certain things and incorporate all of the creative partners into that process so everyone can buy in and adhere to it and make changes as we need to, and everyone's okay with making those changes. And here's the reason why we need to do that. But yeah, as far as, I'm certainly not going to tell a photographer how to shoot or what to shoot. That is their job. I am not going to tell you what to play at one certain moment or how to do it. That is your job. That is your specialty. So it's not the job of a planner to micromanage the vendor team. If you are hiring good people who know what they're doing, it's pretty much a hands-off situation in that regard. So yeah, it's very important to let the professionals do what they do best.
It's almost like a casting. Milos Forman, director, he directed Man on the Moon, the Andy Kaufman movie, and his mentality was, once you hire the right actors, then just let them go. And
Absolutely.
And I was lucky enough to actually watch him film a scene with Jim Carrey once, and he just let Jim do whatever Jim wanted to do. It's like, I hired Jim for a reason, just do it. And that is the benefit, because I have worked with planners that very much do want to micromanage, as opposed to, there's a reason why I put your name in the list of names that the bride had to contact.
And it's so funny you mentioned, and there might be some planners who do micromanage, and it's unfortunate, but I do understand the reason why they might feel that they need to do that, because they haven't worked with good people yet.
Yeah,
in all honesty.
I mean, that's the other caveat to it is there are DJs out there that need to be micromanaged because they just don't. I don't want to say they don't get it, but for some reason they're unwilling to follow a timeline, which to me has always been the easiest thing in the world to do. Yeah, I know sometimes you have to adjust and change on the fly, but that comes to communication the day of.
Absolutely. And it's not so much, I don't know if it's unwillingness, maybe it's experience, maybe it's too much experience to where, I've worked with those, and I don't know, why is it I think it's an ego thing with the DJ. I don't get much pushback, but for some reason, DJs that I haven't worked with, sometimes that happens. I love my DJs, anybody we work with, but it's just one of those things to where we're not going to do things just because, if you're going to go rogue, we're going to have a problem. Because there's a reason why we are doing certain things. But if any changes or things that are concerning or things that you're not on board with, we need to discuss that ahead of the wedding day, not on the day of. And I say, hey, we kind of need to do this. And you're, oh, no, that's not how I do it. And I've never done it that way. It's like, I don't give a shit how you've done it. Wait, this is how it needs to be done today. Sorry, are we allowed to cuss on this podcast, Mike? You know me. I'm trying to restrain myself.
I guess we are now.
Yeah. So usually my problem children are the ones that take that mentality to where, I've been in the business 20 years and this is how I do it. It's like, oh, don't ever say that to me. But if there's an issue, that you got to address it before the wedding day. On the day of is not the time to be digging in your heels on certain things. Just be a team player, because it's not about you or me or any one person. It's about the couple and the guest experience and their overall wedding day and their happiness. So
yep,
that's how I see it.
I wholeheartely agree that it's all about the couple. Yeah. And I got to a point where, I'm not going to lie, I used to be the guy who was like, well, this is how I do it, and this is how it works for me. And then I got to a point where I'm like, yeah, but and I think you were actually the coordinator where the light bulb came on. I'm like, well, she has spent more time with the couple than I have. So maybe she's coming at this from a place of, it's not that you want to hinder me in any way, but you just know what the couple's looking for, and so I should probably just shut up and work around it.
Well, and that's where I'm coming from too. Like, I'm happy to have that conversation, but let's have it before the wedding
Right.
day.
Yeah.
If there's concerns or things that you're not on board with, let's talk about it. I send the final timeline out 2 weeks prior to the wedding. If there's an issue, let's talk about it before we get to that point, and that's where that friction comes in.
What are some things that a bride needs to be thinking about that she's not? And this is we're going to assume that all brides are hiring a planner. So even coming to you, she's obviously already thought of that. But what are some other things that she's not thinking of?
That is such a loaded question. Well, I mean, we're assuming that she's already hired us. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't hire planners because they think the venue is the same thing as what we do, which is not the case. It's so hard to answer that question because every single couple is different. And usually if I'm working with them, I'm guiding them through what those steps look like. But it's also just reading the fine print and making sure that we're proactive in certain things and not assuming you're allowed to do certain things because maybe you're not. So I'm not sure if I'm answering that question correctly, but it's very case specific.
Yep. No, definitely. Other than hiring a planner, what can and this is kind of the question you're talking about, how the different gifts and everything to make the planning process fun. What are some other things outside of hiring a planner that a bride can do to make the process fun? That's the one thing that I've kind of always wanted to do is, this shouldn't be a stressful time. It should be, I don't want to say easy, but the choices should, when they're made with logic, going back to the interaction we had about what a wonderful world and that there should be a logical, the choices that you're making should be easy. What can a bride do to remember that and to make the planning process more fun?
Well, I think first thing, and I know it's so tough because nobody likes to talk about money, but making sure couples have a realistic budget is the ground floor, is the foundation to ensuring the planning process is going to be enjoyable and not frustrating, because there's so much misinformation out there on what things should cost and discount this and average cost that. You got to ignore all of that because your budget is directly related to your guest count. And your venue food and beverage is going to be the biggest chunk of that, again, directly related to your guest count. So ensuring that you're really getting sound advice and sound numbers and really doing your homework and crafting and putting together a realistic budget on what things really cost, not what you want them to cost, but what they really cost, will help make that process more enjoyable because you're going to have that realistic expectation from the start. And you're going to go in with eyes wide open and know what you can expect to spend and not budget, $300 for a DJ and realize that it's $2,500 and going, oh my God, why? What's going on here? So that's probably the biggest piece of advice I can have is just make sure that you've got a realistic budget. And, because your budget is directly related to the guest count, there's two things that need to happen. Either your budget needs to be flexible or you need to cut your guest count, but there's no way to put a square peg into a round hole. At some point, push will come to shove, and one of those things will have to give.
And that's why I should give on flowers. I'm kidding. I do not want to get any of my floral friends upset with me, but don't skip on entertainment. I'm just...
Yeah. Well, and one other thing, aside from the budget aspect, making the planning process fun. And it shouldn't be stressful. Yes, it's a lot of detail and a lot of organization to keep on top of, especially if you don't have a planner. But, enjoy the ride, enjoy the engagement with your fiance, and enjoy all the fun parts of being engaged and planning a wedding. The food tasting, the cake tasting, meeting with your vendors, doing a floral mock-up with your floral designers so you can see and kind of get taste of the what the wedding day is going to be like, and relax. Take some days off from wedding planning so your entire life doesn't revolve around that. I'm sure your better half would probably appreciate that, depending on which one of you is doing the bulk of the planning. But just keep in mind that it's one day It's an important day to most people, at least that I work with, but I know it's not the rest of our lives, and it's not the be all end all of, who you are. So if it's not fun, make some changes because it shouldn't be a stressful, horrible experience. You're doing it wrong if it is. I'm sorry to say.
How does seasonality affect trends, or how are winter weddings different from fall weddings, different from summer weddings?
Hot or cold? I mean, in Southern California, it's so funny. You know how it is. In Southern
Yeah.
California, we really don't get a huge fluctuation where seasons are involved. Yes, we have wet season and dry season, 100-degree weather versus, low 40s. So essentially, just being mindful of the time of year that you are getting married, temperature, and the chance for rain, and just planning for that. So if you're getting married in the fall, it might be nice during the day, might be chilly at night. You have to make sure that the comfort of your guests is taken into account. So maybe you need some heaters, maybe you need to do some blankets, maybe some fire pits, something. When it's triple digit heat in Temecula, Palm Springs, as it is every summer and even into the fall, cooling stations, ice cold towels, fans, something. So just keeping that in mind certainly helps. And regardless of the time of year, because you know how it is, in May, we get monsoonal moisture, we get random thunderstorms in the spring and the summer because of the hurricane season in Mexico. Rain is possible in Southern California year round. So every single couple, from the moment you begin planning, you have to have a rain plan in the back of your mind and prepare to budget for that, because you never know. There is nothing worse than the week of your wedding scrambling to find a tent because you didn't plan for that or budget for that in the beginning of the process. So that is extremely important to make sure that you account for all of those unexpected weather things.
You and I are both very connected to the industry in terms of networking events and getting our face out there and meeting other people. What is the advantage to a bride? Should they care that we're going to networking meetings, or is it just something that we do to help ourselves?
No, I think they should care, not necessarily to where it might sway who they hire, but when we're excuse me, when we're connected in our industry, that should, building relationships and expanding our circle and making sure that whoever we're working with are good at what they do and they care about what they do, and that we're recommending wedding professionals who are taking care of their couples. The education aspect of it too. If you're working with a wedding professional who's not passionate about continuing education, what is the value and what are you getting out of that as the client if they're not keeping up on trends and best practices and making in technology and just serving our couples? So that's all part of going to networking events, because not only for us on the relationship side, but also for our couples, because we're educating ourselves and we're keeping up on all of those things that are important for longevity in business, to make sure that we're serving our couples the best way we can, and that we're, learning new things so we can be the best at what we do.
On the music side, obviously my role in the wedding is music. There's kind of a timeline that we can follow. Once we first hear a song, or once a song first comes out, we can kind of predict, okay, this is when it's going to become big. This is when it's going to hit weddings. Is there that kind of lead up in the wedding industry? If you see something one day, can you sit there and say, like, for instance, the Pantone color of the year, when you see that, okay, 6 months from now or however long it's going to be, I know that I'm going to start seeing that color a lot?
Yeah, trends it depends on the trend, but like the color of the year, you usually don't see that year. It doesn't hit until the next year or even the year after that. And then by then we're sick of it, but our couples still think it's fresh. So we got to keep that in mind, that, we see things a lot sooner and we experience things a lot sooner than a lot of our couples do. So it's important to keep that in mind. But trends, it does take a while for them to trickle down. Like runway, fashion, and color takes a while to trickle from standard runway fashion to weddings, and then from home decor trends, and then it translates into weddings. It's about a year usually, but it depends on what that trend is. When the baby's breath craze came in, runways were decorating with baby's breath, and then that kind of hit a little bit sooner than other trends. But yeah, it depends. But it does take some time for it to trickle down into the weddings.
And what do you personally do to keep abreast of the latest trends? What are you looking at? What are you staying on? How are you staying on top of things?
Sure. Fashion, for sure. I look at European runways and their set designs. So Europe fashion, American fashion, interior designers and what they're doing in home decor, and looking at architecture and just those certain elements and how they can translate into weddings, from colors to graphics to shapes and installations and, floral design, fabrics, linen. I know a lot of our linen companies kind of follow those same trends as well. So a lot of patterns that you might see in the fashion world then make it their way to linen. So you can dress your reception in fabrics that might have been popular on the runway, 6 months to a year before that. So,
is getting the new catalog from the linen companies a lot like back in the day when, as a kid, you'd get the toy catalog and you'd open it up and just go, "Oh, I want this."
For a wedding designer, yes. Catalogs from our specialty rental companies and new linen samples and swatches I get in the mail, which is awesome. So yeah. Like kid in a candy store when I get all the new releases of all the products that I'm able to then offer to my couples. So that is exciting.
And I can't believe that we're at about 42 minutes right now, and we haven't even talked about the emergence of the specialty rental market, because that just came up not too long ago. I mean, I'm going to have you back for a part 2. There's just so much deep dive that we can get into. But it is now time for our Fast 5 questions. These are 5 questions. Answer as quickly as you can. First off, better Hawaiian artist, Don, Ho, or Is?
Is.
Yep, that is absolutely true. Best Hawaiian island?
Oh, God. Okay, I'm partial to Oahu because that's where I lived and both my kids were born there. So Oahu.
Fair enough, but it's actually Kauai. Kauai is the right answer there.
Okay, my cousin lives there.
Fair enough.
I didn't realize there was a right or wrong answer.
Oh yes. No. These are questions. They're right or wrong answers there. Best 80s hairband?
Poison.
It's yeah. You know what? I'm going to change my. Originally, the answer was Rat. I'm going to change it. No, you're absolutely right. It is Poison.
Yeah, Rat only had a few popular songs, so. Poison.
Well, and I think the reason I used Rat is because they were in that commercial where the I think it's Geico, where our apartment has a rat problem, and
yeah, yeah, got it.
Honestly, I studied advertising for a little while, and the whoever's running the Geico ad campaigns, they're just geniuses.
Genius, yes, I agree.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Wars.
Yep, that is absolutely true. Burlap or mason jars?
Oh, that is such a trick question. Neither. Oh my God.
Neither is the. We also would have accepted they both should die as an answer.
They should have died 5 years ago. Although, in full disclosure, everyone is laughing at me. I have my COVID cork collection, and guess what I'm collecting them in?
A mason
jars, baby. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Michelle, for your time. And now's the opportunity where I allow you to tell our listeners where they can find you, where they can follow you, how they can get more information about not only you, but also, because we did mention Michelle Garibay Events is a team of planners. Yes,
absolutely. Very active on Instagram at Michelle Garibay Events. The website is michellegaribayevents.com. And yes, Mike, you are right. We are a team, me, Kara, Alex, Carly, Lauren, Sarah, and we all service different areas, including LA, Orange County. So we are a team, and most of us are active on Instagram, but either one, website or Instagram, is where we are.
And that's Garibay, Garibay.
That's right.
I know that I had some trouble. So michellegaribayevents.com. Thank you, Michelle, for giving us some time and answering some questions.
Thank you. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. We want to once again thank Michelle for taking some time out of her day to be on the show, and we've got more shows coming. I know that when I started the Untitled Music Project, I had grand designs of doing 2 a month and then 1 a month and then 1, and 5 years later the next one. But we've got that smoothed out. Life is to the point now where I'm going to be able to sit down and do more of these. In fact, we've got plenty in the recorder or in the can ready to go. So we'll trade off. It'll be one month one time the Untitled Music Project, then Broadcast, Untitled Music Project, Broadcast, so on and so forth. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to start with once a month, but hopefully 2 a month, essentially. So we'll do one Untitled Music Project, and 2 weeks later we'll do a Broadcast, and then the next month Untitled Music Project, and then 2 weeks later Broadcast, so on and so forth. But hopefully we can get to doing every week. So 1 week Untitled Music Project, next week Broadcast, Untitled Music Project, Broadcast, so on and so forth, till we get this full. As always, you can check me out at csquaredevents.com. And on Instagram at C2DJ, that's the company page, and my own personal page is at DJ Mikey C Squared. You will find archives of the shows not only in csquaredevents.com in the vlog section, but also csquaredradio.com. We have those up there as well. So you can email us at csquaredradio at csquaredevents.com. Also, you can send us a message through the Instagram C2DJ or DJ Mikey C Squared. However it is, ultimately we're going to get up on all of the different podcasting sites, and would love it if you'd leave us a review and subscribe. So thank you for joining us for the premiere episode of Broadcast, and we'll see you down the road.